Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today is another Fierce Face, and in honor of spooky season, I decided to do the bat. I was really hoping to have the bat palette from Shroud by the time that I made this, but it's okay, it's fine. I will improvise. Now today I'm actually gonna just be focusing on one type of bat. Really, cause the bat I chose to focus on today, and I'm not making this up. The name of this bat is the little brown bat. Like, that sounds like a child's, like the title of a child's story. Like, the little brown bat. The little brown bat lost its mom. Like, it sounds like the name of a children's story. It sounds like a kid named it. Like, a scientist kid, a kid of a scientist went and came back home and was like, "Mom, look, I found this bat." And they're like, "Oh, look, a new species. I guess you get to name it." "Well, it's little and it's brown. How about the little brown bat? How about the little brown bat?" So that's the one that I'll be focusing on today. But really, all of the bats that I was finding have very interesting names. There's the mega bat, there's the micro bat, there's a bulldog bat, there's a nautilus bat, a kitten hognose bat, which is also nicknamed the bumblebee bat. They're just really strange names, if you ask me. Like, I feel like they were named by kids. You can't convince me that they weren't. So we're gonna do my Fierce Face a little bit different today. Not too drastically different, but just a little bit. I've gotten some feedback on the kind of continuity of the facts that I am relaying to you guys, and so instead of just doing a whole bunch of research and then spewing that at you, I'm gonna break it down into different segments: their diet and reproduction, behaviors, habitat, stuff like that. I'm gonna break them up into segments so I can give you those specific facts, so I'm not kind of jumping around. So I've gotten a little bit of feedback, and that it'd be a little bit easier to follow if I broke it up into segments like that. So that is what we are going to be doing today. I just want a disclaimer. I am not a scientist. I'm not a botanist. I am not a entomologist. I don't know. I don't have anything with ologist in my title. So this is me sharing my love of nature and animals with you guys and combining it with my love of makeup. And that's really just all it is. If I misspeak on something, feel free to correct me in the comments. I do love to learn, but just kind of keep it civil, and that's the space that I want to create. I just want to take a quick second and introduce myself. My name is Haley. Here are my socials, and this is my realm of creativity, where I mainly focus on fantasy and makeup related things. So if that sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing and becoming a companion on my makeup quest. I usually upload videos Tuesdays and Thursdays. If I, for some reason, miss an upload, I will notify you guys on Instagram and Twitter, so please be sure to go follow me on there. And now let's get into the video. Little brown bats are usually found in environments that are swamplands, and surprisingly, oh my goodness, surprisingly, their highest recorded population is in New Hampshire. I found that kind of strange. These bats are some of the most well-known bats, and there are more little brown bats combined in North America and Canada than any other bat. So there's a lot of them. Chances are, usually, if you see a bat, it's probably one of them. Size-wise, they are very small. They weigh less than an ounce. Usually less than half an ounce, mostly. So my foundation bottle is heavier than, there's an ounce of product in here, and it's heavier than a bat. Like, just, this is my bat. Fat bat. It's my fat bat. I think that that's mind-boggling. They're so small. Their wingspan, however, is usually over half a foot. It's roughly between 8 to 11 inches long tip to tip, which is frightening because it's almost all wing. So I just imagine if you were like the size of your torso, but your arms were the length of like your legs. That'd be frightening, wouldn't it? I think it would. I think it would be frightening. I don't know if this is just a little brown bat thing, but they have 4 different roosts, so locations that they stay in, homes, if you will. They have a daytime roost, they have a evening roost, they have a hibernation roost, and a reproduction roost, like where they like to give birth. A daytime roost is usually very dark with southwestern exposure, so when the sun is setting, that it'll wake them up with the heat. And then a nighttime roost are usually really cramped, dark areas that in the wintertime, they can all kind of cram together and make sure that everybody is warm. And then hibernation roost has very specific qualifications. The hibernation roost needs to maintain a level and consistent 40 degrees to there's something with the metabolism to where, oh my gosh, there's like a hair in my eye, to allow for the bats to slowly work through the reserves of their fat for hibernation. I assume that 40 degrees is like their hot spot. Like if it's too cold, then they're going to be using too much energy to kind of cool them, to warm themselves up. And then on the flip side, if it's too hot, they're probably going to expend too much energy trying to cool themselves down. I imagine that 40 degrees is probably something like it's probably just a sweet spot. They like to keep their night roost and their day roost separate places for multiple reasons, but they kind of go together. It keeps it keeps shit from piling up, and it also keeps predators from finding their roost. So that's usually why they like to keep them separate. Their hibernation roosts, they typically will stay at for 4 to 6 months, probably just depending on the temperature outside. And then their nursery roosts are pretty similar to their daytime roosts. I think they're just a little bit warmer. They're not like other bats. They don't migrate, they hibernate. During the day, little brown bats will usually sleep, and if they're not sleeping, they're grooming. And then when the night starts, that's when they start their feeding period, which can last up to 5 hours before they go to their night roost, which is usually in close proximity to their day roost. Stopping at the night roost after feeding allows for them to deposit any shit that they need to do before moving to their day roost. Their guano attracts predators, so they want the predators to go where they're not going to be, which is their night roost. So they can fly up to 20 miles per hour, and they use some self-vocalization in conjunction with echolocation to locate their prey during their feeding times. Obviously, we aren't as cool as bats, so we can't hear their calls. Individual bats have their own flight patterns that they usually take during feeding, and when they're going to and from each roost, they have their own individual flight patterns that they like to follow. And bats aren't really territorial, especially over hunting grounds, so that's not really something that, you know, they fight over. They're just like, you fly over there, I'll fly over there, and we don't cross paths because there's enough bugs for all of us. So I mean, I think bats got it figured out. Now, in their hibernation roost, I mentioned that there is specific specifications that they need, and that's like the 40-degree mark. They also need it really humid. And now, while that is advantageous to the bats, it's also perfect breeding grounds for fungus. And one of the things that plague the little brown bat and a number of other bat species is white nose syndrome that is caused by a fungus that can grow in the conditions of their hibernation roosts, which is unfortunate. You know, they're sleeping and they think they're safe, and then they're like, psych, you're not. The white nose syndrome has been found to affect at least 5 other populations of bats and have decimated bat populations in both Asia and Europe. There is no safe bugs when it comes to the appetite of the bat. They eat midgets, which look like fancy mosquitoes. They're trying to be like, oh, I'm not a mosquito, I'm a midge. Did I say midget? I definitely did. Nope, they're midge. Fancy mosquitoes. You know, the basic mosquitoes. Catty flies, which look like the ugly Look at this guy. He looks like the ugly step-sibling to a butterfly. Like, ugh. Mayflies, which are, they're mayflies. I mean, look at them. They're mayflies. Lacewings, which look like the fairy godmother of butterflies. Moths, not Mothra. No one can take him down. Not even these cute little guys. During feeding periods, especially females, they can eat up to 10% of their body weight, especially if they're lactating, to feed their little pups. And just one feeding period, they can eat up to 10% of their body weight, which is a lot. That's a lot of bugs. Something I found interesting is that they eat so many bugs that if we didn't have bats, it's estimated that farmers would have to spend around $4,000 to $5,000 a year on pesticides for a thing that bats do naturally. They are estimated to eat about, I think it's 90 tons? Hold on. Yeah, 94 tons of insects a year. That's a lot. That's a lot of insects, guys. Bats have a couple of different methods for catching their prey. First is their typical just, going in with their mouth. And then second, they scoop up with their wings and their tails. And I don't know who else didn't know, but I did not know that bats had tails. I was doing my research and I was like, hey babe, did you know bats had tails? And he's like, yeah, I knew bats had tails. And I was like, what? How did I not know bats had tails? Like, I don't know. But that is a way that they catch their food, is that they, get their tail into it. Another cool thing that I found that the little brown bats do is that they typically will focus on only one bug for the duration of a feeding period, and scientists have a theory as to why that is, and so they require different ways to catch them. So they will just kind of repeat the same action over and over again instead of having to switch up their plan of attack multiple times in a feeding. They'll just focus on one bug for the duration of that time, which I thought was smart. They are also found usually near bodies of water, because a majority of the bugs that they like to catch usually have a aquatic stage in their life. So they're like, you think you're safe, but you're not, because I'm your neighbor and I'm gonna eat you. Little brown bats are very promiscuous with one another. Like, they do not care. I don't think that they have sort of like any like way of being like, yes, I want to mate with you. No, I don't want to mate with you. Like, preferences. I don't think they have preferences. They're just like, yeah, I need to, reproduce this spring. Give me a baby. Like, I don't know. It was weird. But yeah, they're very promiscuous, and they have two types of mating. They have active mating and passive mating. Active mating is when both participants are awake or active. They don't have to necessarily just be awake. They're both participating. Second is passive mating. I don't know if I said feeding before. I mean mating. Passive mating is usually males, and they will mate with torpid. I had to look up what that meant. It just meant inactive. It didn't necessarily mean asleep. But what was really interesting is that 35% of passive mating is actually homosexual. So take that as you will. I thought that was very, very interesting. I just am like, okay, that's all right. Who would have thought? I wouldn't. There have been some recorded cases of I believe fellatio among, I think, fruit bats, which I also found very fascinating. Another super, super fascinating thing, females can hold semen for 7 months. They can delay ovulation, keep semen for 7 months. I thought that was so cool. Like, I know of some animals that have like fake pouches that will store like semen that they don't want to be impregnated by and stuff like that, but I have never heard of them just, if this is the only time I'm gonna get laid, I might as well keep this semen around until it's time for us to have babies. I just found that really fascinating. Pups are born during June and July, usually after a 50 to 60 day gestation period. After birth, females lose their ability to thermoregulate, and that's due to the fact that they're putting all of their energy into lactation for their new pups. Their pups will have their eyes open and be able to hear with hours after birth. And then they'll be self-supporting around the 4-week mark. Typically, moms will start to wean their pups at 3 weeks. Now, while bats have some natural predators, there's none more deadly than the white nose syndrome. And I know that I spoke on it briefly before. This is a lot of blush. But white nose syndrome, how it affects bats and why it's so deadly to them. When they are in their hibernation roosts and they get infected with white nose syndrome, what it causes them to do is to wake up at times that they're really not supposed to be awake and use up those fat reserves. So it's basically kind of starving them to death very slowly. They'll wake up at times where they're not supposed to and use energy that they don't really have to use, because all that energy needs to be set aside for hibernating. So it slowly kills them and just like drains their life force. So that is one of the biggest things that they face. Do you like bananas? Do you like your avocado toast? Well, If you answered yes to either one of those questions, you can thank the bats, because without the bats, there wouldn't be pollination for those things. They also pollinate mangoes as well as figs and cocoa. So if you like any of those, be kind to your bats, because without them, you wouldn't have your avocado toast. The oldest living bat is 41 years old. Usually they don't live past 20, so that's kind of amazing. Bats clean themselves, much like our furry home companions, the cat. They also clean behind their ears. So they're not as dirty as people think that they are, and fewer than 10 people in the last 50 years have ever gotten rabies from a bat. So maybe think about that next time. If you ever find one and you think about how dirty it is and that you're going to get rabies, the chances are very slim. So, you know, keep up to date on your rabies shot, but don't kill a bat. Just don't. It's not cool. It's not a good look for you. Bat killer, you don't want that on your resume. And last but certainly not least, I have a couple of facts that will help differentiate megabats from microbats. There's a couple of differences. Mainly, megabats have 2 claws and microbats only have 1 claw. They drew the short straw in nature. Megabats have mega brains, and microbats have not mega brains. They rely on a lot of their senses, not their smarts. And then they roost differently. Megabats hang upside down, in typical bat fashion, and microbats will bend their neck and look at the world right side up. So, I'm not quite sure how that looks. That's it for me today, guys. I hope you guys liked it. Had a blast researching bats. I was just cracking up last night, learning a whole bunch of new things about them. So I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did like it, please subscribe. Remember, share with your friends, and let me know down below what your favorite interesting bat fact I gave you was, and if there's anything that I don't know that you find interesting about bats. So I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.